Thursday, the 29th of April, 2021, and you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast for science, reason, and critical thinking. Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism on Merseyside around the UK and internationally. I am your host, Mike Hall. With me today is Marsh.
Hello.
And Alice.
Hello.
So I've had a thing. Do you remember? It might have been at this time last year. I talked on the show about my ears going weird, and I got horribly dizzy and fell over.
Yes, you had the old vertigo thing, and you have to keep doing that, lying down and wobbling from side to side like a weeble.
Lying down and sitting up and lying down and sitting up. And since that happened, I've had 4 recurrences of that since that happened. And it's horrible. It's absolutely horribly distressing, awful. Obviously, I can't drive because, if I'm going around a corner and that happens, I'm going to kill somebody. It's just a distressing situation to be in. But it happened again a week or two ago. And it was so severe that I actually ended up being physically sick through how dizzy I was.
Blimey.
Through doing this. And I had a situation where I was kind of sat on the side of the bed, going, oh, don't be sick, don't be sick, don't be sick. You know that feeling where you're going to be sick and you're just like, don't be sick, don't be sick. I'm going to think my way out of being sick.
I do that all the time. Nicola just leans into it and goes, fuck it, I'm going to go and be sick. And she'll just go and be sick. And then you're like, oh, that was better. Whereas I'll be like, no, you're not going to be sick. You're not going to be sick. And I'll spend like an hour like that.
Placebo affecting it. So I'm sitting there saying, I'm not going to be sick. I'm not. And then it dawned on me, you are going to be sick. You don't have an option here. This is going to happen. And I thought, okay, so I need to get to the bathroom. How do I get to the bathroom without moving? Because as soon as I move, I'm going to be sick. And so what ended up happening is we opened all of the doors between the bedroom and the bathroom, and I just sprinted for it and leapt, clutched the toilet, and immediately threw up as soon as I grabbed hold of the thing. It was absolutely fucking appalling.
That seems a worse solution than crawling.
No.
Like a slow crawl.
And any movement, I would have vomited. I need to get there as fast as possible.
I see.
So I ended up, I called the doctor and said, look, I can't. This is ridiculous. I feel so ill. I feel so bad. And they said, okay, right, we'll get you to come in for an appointment. How is Friday? And this was like Tuesday. They said, how is Friday? I said, oh, it's not brilliant. Next week, Friday next week. How can you do Friday next week? And it was, no. So Lana had said to them, no, we're not doing Friday next week. What the fuck are you talking about? So they said, okay, we'll see if we can squeeze you in today. We'll get a doctor to give you a call back. And so I ended up that afternoon, a doctor called me up and said, yeah, I need to see you. I want you to come in. So I went into my GP and I explained what happened, and I said it's vertigo and I get this, and I've had it like 5 times over the last year and it's got really bad. And he checked my blood pressure in case it was things like that. But he then lay me down in the surgery to deliberately trigger it so he could see my eyes going funky as it happens. I think they called it a nystagmatism or something like that.
Okay.
Listeners are going to write in and go, it's this, you dickhead.
One of them things, yeah.
And he said, yeah, that's a positive test for BPPV, which is what they thought it was, which is benign positional something vertigo. And it's essentially where a piece of crap, dislodges from inside your ear canal and floats around in the fluid.
Okay.
And when it brushes against the hairs on the inside, it sends fake signals off to your brain to say, you're upside down, really? And so you end up with, that kind of vertigo effect. And so he said, what I'm going to do and what I'm going to perform for you now is I'm going to do the Epley maneuver. And I said, well, I've been doing the Brant Danoff exercises, which is what the doctors told me to do last time.
We've all been doing that, mate. Fucking hell. Yeah, that's obvious. That's step number 1. Come on. We're not school kids here.
And he said, no, we're going to do the Epley maneuver. So what he did is he laid me down and then on my side and then on the other side, and my head's hanging off the edge of the couch thing in the doctor's office. Sometimes in the office they'll have a kind of quasi bed thing for you to lie on. So my head's hanging off that. And he's turning my head this way and turning my head that way. And he says, I know this seems like voodoo, but I promise you this is evidence-based. I'm like, you're talking my fucking language here, mate. Pressing all the right buttons here, evidence-based.
Given that you said you've got like a bit floating around, I thought you were going to say so he lay me down, then turn me aside, and then he sort of smacked the back of my head like I'm trying to get sand out of a boot.
So he turned me over and turned me this way and turned me that way and then sat me up and said, right now, stay there for 2 minutes and I'm going to write up your notes. And then he finished writing up the notes and he said, right, get up now. And it was gone. Just cured. Just gone.
Wow.
Which apparently, having looked this up, what they've done is, when they've turned me this way and that way, they've got that little piece of shit that was in my ear to float further into a different bit of my head, so it's not fucking with the hairs in my ear canal anymore.
Oh, okay.
They've just used gravity to make it kind of float around a couple of corners.
Like one of those games you get where there's a ball bearing in a maze and you've got to sort of like move it around to get it into the hole.
But I've been dealing with this shit for a year, 5 times over the last year, and it's debilitating, and it lasts days, and it's horrible. And it's like, if there wasn't this fucking pandemic on, I could have gone to the GP, had an Epley maneuver a year ago, and been fucking fine.
Can you self-do an Epley maneuver in future, if you needed to?
It is not recommended to do it yourself.
Really? It did sound like you were just lying down in a series of different pauses.
Well, you have to maintain your... Because I thought it was some fucking chiropractic bollocks at first, and that's when he was, it's really evidence-based. I was like, thank fuck for that.
Because chiropractors normally tell you that it isn't.
That's fair. But yeah, it's not recommended to do on your own. But yeah, it was literal magic. Actual, literal, genuine magic.
Right, so you're giving up the show then?
So we're done. It's now the Harry Potter cast. It's, the world.
I mean, let's not start that. Like Skepticism didn't already have enough of a reputation.
So yeah, my head's fine now. Brilliant. Hooray!
Nice. Good to know. Let's fingers crossed that lasts. Because the crossing the fingers thing also works. It's evidence-based, Mike.
He said 70 to 90% first-time cure rate with this, he said.
Nice.
And yeah, looks legit so far. On an N=1 sample, but legit so far.
Have you tried putting it to the test? Sort of running very quickly in a tight circle, things like that, to really sort of fuck with it? Doing some roly-polies down a hill?
I did. I had to sit upright for 2 days, sleeping upright and everything. And I bought myself a neck brace to keep my head upright while I was so I could kind of fall asleep and my head would just go pop over rather than flop all the way down, because that would risk the thing fucking floating back again.
Right.
So I had to do that
But after 2 days, it's decided it's going to stay there.
Yeah, basically.
It's just relodged like sediment.
And there's a small chance that it could, fucking float back again. But if so, he said, we'll do another Epley. And if that still doesn't cure it properly, he'll get ENT involved. But it looks like it's worked.
Nice. Congratulations.
Good stuff.
You might remember a few episodes ago, I talked about the London mayoral campaign, and in particular one of the independent candidates, Brian Rose. At the time, I took issue with Brian Rose having held multiple COVID conspiracy theory interviews with David Icke and Andrew Wakefield and everyone from Plandemic 2 and Alex Jones and even more than that. And I took issue with Rose using the notion of free speech as a way of fundraising his digital freedom platform, promising upgrades that are still yet to appear to that website, with many people now asking where the money they donated went. So you might remember all of that. During the last month since I covered it, a few more things have come out about Brian Rose that I thought were worth touching on as a kind of a follow-up. So, for one, a video emerged from 2018 of Brian Rose drinking his own piss, which surprised a lot of voters. And it's become like a thing on social media that when people mention Brian Rose, it's like, oh yeah, what, the piss guy? To the point where Yvette Cooper, a Labour politician, inadvertently tweeted the letter P by essentially, butt dialing Twitter, and inadvertently tweeted the letter P, and people respond to it saying, what is in Brian Rose's first cup of the day? ? So the Brian Rose drinks piss thing has really taken off on social media, though it wasn't that much of a surprise to me, because I even mentioned in the last show that Brian Rose has promoted urine therapy on his channel in the past and has interviewed urine therapy advocates. So something I already mentioned there has kind of gone a bit mainstream. And then there was revelations on the City AM website that Rose was actually facing calls to pull out of the race over a video on his website that contains a slew of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, which was a video. The video in question was from 2019, featuring David Icke telling Brian Rose in detail about how 9/11 was a plot hatched by the State of Israel, that a large group of ultra-Zionists in America were responsible for the cover-up, and that there was a hidden hand of ultra-Zionist extremists who run the world through a series of shadowy organizations. And again, this has been met with calls from Jewish groups to say he should pull out because of that. There's lots of people shocked about it on social media. But it wasn't that much of a surprise to me because I mentioned in the show last month that he interviewed David Icke several times, and all of that stuff is just pretty much bog standard David Icke, to be honest. Elsewhere, Brian Rose has been interviewed by the Daily Mail's Michael Crick. I don't know if you saw this video from the Mail Plus with Michael Crick. He met Brian Rose on the campaign trail, and he put to him some of the complaints that people have submitted about Rose's Business Accelerator self-improvement courses. Because Crick actually interviewed some of the people who feel deeply disappointed by their experiences with Rose's courses. You know, one of the students that he meets, she describes the course as diabolical because according to her, on day 5 of the 8-week course, she told them she wanted no more of this and wanted to leave, and they wouldn't let her leave, and she had to go through with it anyway. And that she only got her money back by going through her credit card company and providing them evidence to point to the fact that the product she was sold wasn't as advertised and that the whole thing was a farce. And that's the only way she'd get money back, not through their money back guarantee, not through talking to them to say, I feel misled by this, but actually submitting it as essentially a fraudulent transaction by for the credit card company because she felt she was completely misled. And this lady was just one of a group of former students who are now banding together to get their money back from Rose. And in fact, there's a Facebook group of 200 to 300 of Brian Rose's former students who are just trying to get their money back. This is just the ones who found that Facebook group. The organizer of that Facebook group says many of the students who are trying to get their money back felt like they were in a vulnerable position and that they saw Brian Rose's courses as a way out of the financial hole they were in because he was promising that you'd make returns, that you'd have this ultra successful business. So it was an investment of $3,000 in order to make so much more money later. And people felt they were in a financial hole, that this was all they could do. But they've actually accused Rose of having absolutely no compassion for their situation. And in fact, in this video on the Daily Mail's website, Michael Crick highlights the cases of 15 people who'd each paid the $15,000 price for the inner circle variant, the inner circle tier of the Business Accelerator course. And when you pay for that, it promises regular one-to-one sessions with Brian. And according to these 15 people who'd got together to write a letter, in over 6 months of the course, they'd each received less than half an hour with Brian of their regular one-to-one sessions, cumulatively each of them half an hour across 6 months. All of this was put to Rose. Rose claims he's graduated 5,000 students. So he said, I'm tremendously proud of my courses. I've graduated 5,000 students, which Crick points out there are 300 people who want refunds just in that Facebook group alone, which is like a 5% or more level of your students who feel so ripped off, they're demanding their money back and getting together on Facebook to talk about that. To which Brian Rose just tries to shrug the whole thing off with a joke. And Crick's like, it's not funny. These people are in very vulnerable positions. And much of this is stuff that I kind of already knew and that we'd already sort of covered on the show previously. But one thing that was interesting in there as well is that Michael Crick mentioned that Rose was doing so well in the bookies, in the odds. And he asked Rose whether he'd put a bet on himself. And Rose was like, yeah, I put a small wager on myself. And Crick's like, okay, what was it? 5,000, 10,000? Was it 10,000 pounds? Was it 10,000 pounds, Brian? He said, no, it was yes, it was at least 10,000 pounds. All right, was it 20? He said, we'll stop at 20. So it looks like, I mean, Crick has essentially goaded Rose into admitting that he's placed a bet in excess of £20,000 on himself to win the election, which I think might go somewhere to explaining why he's second favourite with the bookies while he's polling at 2%. Because I don't know how many people are putting massive sums, and £20,000 is a significant sum to bet. Yeah. More than that even. So I don't know how many people are actually betting on the mayoral race at that kind of level. So it might be why he's being anchored up. I don't think there's many people betting 20 grand on Lawrence Fox to win it or the Tory candidate to win it.
Yeah, 20 grand lump sum bet on a single outcome would raise some eyes at the bookies. It would raise some eyebrows. Would also raise some eyes, but would raise eyebrows at the bookies. 20 grand on a single outcome. It definitely would.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was quite interesting. Also, there's been some new information that's come to light that I'd not heard of before. So for one, I found out that Brian used to encourage his fans to sign up to affiliate investment courses run by Agora Financial. This is a financial company, an American financial company, Agora Financial. It used to sell stock trading systems and other forms of investment products, which would essentially promise massive returns. You can go in on this and it'll promise huge gains in the future, a kind of get rich quick kind of thing. And I think they're the kind of investment products you'd occasionally get cold calls about. I don't know if you guys have had these kind of cold calls where someone phones up and asks you whether you want to be a Forex trader or a Wall Street trader and how they can really help you get these gains.
Yeah.
I get a million of these phone calls, so many of them. I'll go through weeks where I'll get like 3 a day.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Until they fuck off for a bit.
So I don't know that that's exactly what Agora is, but looking at what they're doing, it seems like something in the same kind of area in terms of these investment products that promise quite high returns. And what actually happened was the industry began to clamp down and regulate on that practice, on the selling of specific services, that you are signing up for this particular service and we will do this on your behalf. That got clamped down and regulated by the industry. But the unscrupulous part of the market then moved on to newsletters that advise of schemes to become part of, because those aren't regulated. So they're not saying we'll manage it for you, but they're saying if you just sign up to this investment scheme, you'll be part of something that's definitely going to go through the roof. And we're working on the advice of this particular incredibly accurate trader, that kind of thing. It's actually what Nigel Farage is doing now. I don't know if you guys have seen the Fortune and Freedom investment tips and schemes that Farage is fronting.
Yeah, I get him on YouTube ads occasionally. I get him, he turns up going, if you think the business establishment has got your interest at their heart, then you can click skip on this video. But and I've not got further than that.
If you think Nigel Farage has your investment interests at heart, you should do anything Farage says, because that's what he wants from you. I actually signed up to Farage's Fortune and Freedom website, and I get daily emails, at least once a day, from Farage and his team, advising me on what investments to make. And maybe we'll actually come back to that on another occasion. But if we can stick with Agora Financial for now, it's worth noting that they've been in some legal trouble in the past. So in 2003, there was this court case you guys might not have heard of called SEC versus Agora Inc., Pirate Investor, and Frank Porter Stansbury, in which the SEC, which is the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, they alleged that Agora's companies wrongly profited from the selling of false information marketed as insider knowledge and insider trading, and they were found to be guilty of financial fraud. So they said, we've got these insider tips that these stocks are going to go big, and then people would buy them, and it turns out they were bullshitting the entire time and people lost their money. So they were lying to people about these insider tips. Also, in February of this year, 2021, Agora Financial LLC and several of its affiliates have actually agreed to pay more than $2 million to settle a Federal Trade Commission charge that they tricked seniors into buying pamphlets, newsletters, and other publications that falsely promised a cure for type 2 diabetes or promoted a phony plan to help them cash in on government-affiliated check programs. And the Bureau of Consumer Protection Acting Director Daniel Kaufman said of these claims that Agora Financial preyed primarily on older consumers with false or unsubstantiated claims about curing diabetes and about free money from the government. So that's who Agora Financial are. And they currently have their rating suspended by the Better Business Bureau due to a high volume of complaints ranging from poor communication by customer service representatives to false advertising, misrepresentation, and even quite a lot of the complaints include statements that the company has stolen funds from subscribers. This is kind of the unusual nature of the financial advice offered by Agora here. Now, over a period of 2 years, Brian Rose and his London Real Academy wrote 122 articles for Agora Financial. As recently as last year, he was writing them, though many of those articles have been subsequently removed from the internet as far as I could see. It's just the titles that are left. But there are articles doing things like launching Brian Rose's products, like his automatic income system, which promised to make you passive income that will allow you to accelerate your earning potential, and also his quote-unquote retirement accelerator system, after which, again, is littered with online complaints and people warning against it. And one of Agora Financial's current editors, even, Alex Brennan, is listed as currently working with Rose on his retirement accelerator program and also on his Brian Rose Uncensored newsletters. So it seems like there is still an ongoing relationship of some degree if Brian was writing for Agora, was publishing investment programs through Agora, and has a relationship with one of the people who are still editors of Agora. That person that Brian Rose has worked with, Alex Brennan, as well as working on Brian Rose's products, she also works on the Rich Dad, Poor Dad investment newsletter. Okay, this is an investment newsletter which came from a book which features the investment advice of business mogul Robert Kiyosaki. And it claims to be the #1 best-selling personal finance book, Robert Kiyosaki's. And if you look up Robert Kiyosaki, what you see is that he used to promote this book via Amway's multi-level marketing scheme, and that in 2007, the Ohio State Division of Real Estate and Professional Licensing issued a statement warning people against some of the illegal methods preached by Kiyosaki in his books and his seminars. Mm. In 2010, the Canadian Broadcasting Company did an expose on the scams that were being perpetuated by Kiyosaki's company in Canada in the guise of seminars on tracking the success claims of the Rich Dad Seminar organization. So they actually tracked who was claimed to be a success from there. They discovered that they were just not true. The people they said were these massive successes, when you look them up, just weren't. There were investments in trailers and trailer parks, which were being propagated as successful by the teachers, and they were found to just literally be barren pieces of land that nobody was using. So we're saying these are remarkable successes by these people, and we were able to recognize these real estate gains, and actually they were nothing of the sort. They were just scams, essentially. Anyway, this is Robert Kiyosaki, who Alex Brennan is promoting here. And I actually found some videos of Robert Kiyosaki explaining many of the secrets of his success and how you can do exactly like he is, how you can make money like him too. I found those videos on the London Real YouTube channel, in fact, where Brian Rose describes Kiyosaki as a legend and promotes Kiyosaki's products. And we've already seen Kiyosaki there has been shown to be dodgy in a few different places, as we saw on Wikipedia. And they've got that link of the person who was working on Brian Rose's account at Agora was also working on Kiyosaki's account. What was interesting, though, in one of the listings on Brian Rose's site for one of Kiyosaki's videos, one of his kind of investment advices, it was a video from 2019. The page itself included 2 mid-text banners inviting me to register for Tika Tiwari's first event of 2021. And I thought this was strange. This was a video from 2019. And in the write-up of that video, it paused to include a thing saying, you can click here to register for the Tika Tiwari's first event of 2021. So I can only imagine they've gone back and inserted those into that particular video to say, here's this other seminar you can sign up for. I'm not sure, but I can't imagine in 2019 they were planning 2 years in advance someone else's seminar and decided to advertise it specifically twice during this one from Robert Kiyosaki and not anywhere else, or not very many other places. So I thought I'd look into the event that they're talking about. I clicked through on this register for Tika Tiwari's first event in 2021. Now, oddly, this is a page on Rose's site from March the 21st for Tika Tiwari, so only a month ago. Yet the video from Tika Tiwari is missing. It's set to private. It wasn't at the time, but it's now set to private. It's set to private on the London Real YouTube channel. So I can't tell what's in the video because when I tried to click it, a pop-up just appears asking me to subscribe and log in order to watch the full episode. And when I logged in, it just told me it was private. You couldn't watch it now, which sounds strange to me because Brian Rose really likes to promote people he believes and trusts in. And he leaves that stuff up there for a long time. And it seems like Brian Rose really believes in and trusts Tika Tiwari. Because on this website, according to London Real and according to Brian Rose, Tika Tiwari is the #1 most trusted expert in cryptocurrency. And on this page, it explains that in 2016, Tika Tiwari recommended Bitcoin at $428 each. And today it trades for over $60,000 and is the world's first $1 trillion coin. That investment, it says, is a multiplication of 120 times your money. Imagine if you bought $1,000, it says, $10,000 or even more Bitcoin back then, you'd be sitting on a small fortune. So who is the man who seems to be able to predict the future? It's my good friend Tika Tiwari, who was voted the #1 most trusted expert in cryptocurrency by an independent board of 130,000 analysts. This piece from Brian Rose goes on to explain that Tika Tiwari has appeared 8 times on London Real and has consistently chosen the #1 performing cryptocurrency in 2016, 17, 18, 19 and 20. And he goes on to say, in all my years as a banker on Wall Street and a trader in the City of London, I have never seen one person make so many correct calls. It's nothing short of incredible, which is why I buy everything Tika recommends. Unfortunately, the big money to be made in Bitcoin has come and gone. You will not see 120 times gains anymore from Bitcoin. Those big gains will be found in the next $1 trillion coin, and Tika is going to tell you the name of that coin for free. Now, while Tiwari's video may be pulled, so he can't make me a billionaire for free, at least Brian Rose is not exclusive with the investment gurus that he talks about. Because it's lovely that he got Tika Tiwari to give away that $1 trillion information for free, and it's a shame that it's now private and no longer appearing on his site. But Brian does have other financial investment gurus that are still viewable on his site. I found one, for example, from a guy called Jeff Brown on his site. And there was a video up there from Jeff Brown, and it was listed as Jeff Brown, the Silicon Valley legend, talks hottest trends in tech investing which are apparently AI, quantum computing, and CRISPR. And again, Brian Rose seems to really have a high opinion of Jeff Brown. He says Jeff Brown is a Silicon Valley legend. He's picked up the #1 tech stock in 4 of the past 5 years based on return. He's invested over 150 private deals in Silicon Valley, 4 of which have become billion-dollar unicorns. He also helps regular folks learn how to profit from the top tech stocks. His latest discovery is timed stocks. Timed stocks, okay? Now, it explains what time stocks are. I know that you're wondering, what are time stocks?
Haven't a focus, absolutely haven't a clue.
Time stocks, well, it says here, thanks to the US federal government, timed stocks have a preset countdown timer attached to their share price, and the exact moment, down to the second, their timer hits 0, the stock could skyrocket. So they're stocks that are set to skyrocket on a very specific timeline to the second. You just have to wait for the countdown to stop, and then they're going to skyrocket, or at least they could.
They could
skyrocket.
I mean, you can say that about any stock.
Well, I'm not saying Jeff has said about any stock, but Jeff has tracked hundreds of these launches. And as a favour for Brian Rose, it says on Brian Rose's website, he's offered London Reelers access to a historic online free event on Thursday, the 18th of March, 2021. And it says here he'll lay out the proof that every single one of his timed stocks 100% went up. That's according to over a decade of backed, tested market data, and most people have no clue that they even exist. No one is talking about this, but 1 in every 680 stocks are timed stocks. So it's quite amazing to me that Brian Rose has such incredible sway with these clearly incredibly successful, doubtlessly billionaire, doubtlessly financially solvent and hugely profitable fellas, that he's got so much sway with them that they can just give away that kind of valuable information for free. I can't even begin to see how there could be a catch to any of this remarkable information put forward by Brian Rose and the 2 of the people he deems to be the #1 best in their field. There is a minor catch that Rose doesn't mention on his website. One of those minor catches is that on the 9th of May 2005, Tika Tiwari was struck off by the Financial Industry Regulation Authority and barred from ever acting as a broker or otherwise associating with a broker-dealer firm ever again. Which is an odd thing not to mention about the guy you're promoting as the #1 trusted expert broker in cryptocurrency, that he's legally not allowed to be a broker because he's been barred by the financial regulators.
I thought he was a legend.
I mean, we didn't say I mean, there's lots of legends out there.
I've been under the impression he doesn't exist for this entire time.
No, he seems to exist. I've seen videos of, well, I haven't seen videos of Tika Tiwari, but I have seen videos because it was private. As for Jeff Brown, though, the other person who's a legend in this field, in October 2013, he also was barred from being a broker, this time by the US Securities and Exchange Commission. He was barred from acting as a broker or investment advisor or otherwise associating with firms that sell securities or provide investment advice to the public, which is then strange to see him giving investment advice to the public on a website for Brian Rose, where Brian Rose has got exclusive access to the information that Jeff Brown is willing to give to the public as investment advice. In the case of Jeff Brown, we actually know why he was struck off. In August 2011, he pled guilty to conspiracy to commit mail fraud, having, quote, defrauded investors and obtained money and property by means of materially false and misleading statements. So I think we can say at the very least, it is surprising to see a mayoral candidate for London promoting during his campaign just last month the investment advice of someone who pled guilty to conspiracy to commit mail fraud. And given that Brian Rose even went out of his way to spend money advertising Tika Tiwari, there were adverts popping up on YouTube promoting Tika Tiwari. We can infer one of a few different things, I guess. One is that he really believes in this guy without ever having Googled his name and done any amount of due diligence, which would raise real questions over his suitability to be mayor if he can't even notice that the person he's promoting as a massive guru and incredibly trustworthy is banned from offering the kind of advice he's currently offering. Or we could speculate that Brian has in some way been financially compensated for directing people towards Tiwari and Brown, perhaps through an affiliate scheme like the ones we mentioned with Agora Financial. I think these remain important questions for Brian Rose when it comes to the finances. Now, I've had some questions about Brian Rose's finances. I'm not alone on this, though. On the 1st of April this month, the bodybuilder and subject of more than 100 London Reel videos, Dorian Yates, announced on Instagram that he had pulled out of a live conversation with Brian Rose after being told there were topics that Rose would not allow him to ask about on air. I'll tell you what Yates said. He said, I had a lot of people contacting me about the donations to the Freedom platform, and they had a lot of questions that weren't answered. And also a lot of people notified me about Brian's business courses that they were not happy with. I wanted to bring that up with Brian and have a chat with him on the call about it, but he wasn't happy about that and he didn't want to do that. So we mutually decided to cancel the call. So as Brian's not willing to talk about that, he just wants to talk about his campaign for mayor. I didn't think it was wise to go ahead with the call and associate my name with something people are not happy about. Thanks to the people who wrote in with their doubts and their questions. I tried to address it, but Brian's not happy to do that. So there is the free speech champion. There should be no such thing as censorship, Brian Rose. When told that Dorian Yates wanted to ask him some questions on air, Brian Rose refused to allow him to do so. Yates isn't alone in wanting to ask some questions, because you might remember I had my own questions at the end of the previous show. I talked about Brian's mayoral campaign. I mentioned there were questions I'd love to see more reporting on, and that some of those questions regarded how his campaign was being financed and what kind of money was involved generally. And there's been several theories posited and several allegations denied. For example, there's all that money that he raised in the Digital Freedom crowdfunding, which raised more than $1 million for items that are yet to be delivered, like the blockchain technology or the app or the court case against YouTube in the European Court of Human Rights. None of that stuff has happened. So where did the money for that go? Well, according to the Evening Standard, who did an interview with Brian Rose, that Freedom Platform crowdfunder has led to speculation that donations might have been diverted into his campaign fund. But a spokesperson for the Brian for Mayor campaign told the Evening Standard, we firmly refute the allegations that any money raised to support our Digital Freedom Platform initiative has been used for financing the mayoral campaign. The majority of our campaign spend has been self-funded. We believe in our policies, we believe in our ideas, and we back ourselves to win on May the 6th. And he added that he was taking legal action against the publisher of that allegation. But if that's true, that any money used, that there was no money from the Digital Freedom Platform that was ever used to finance the mayoral campaign, it makes it all the more unfortunate that the donation page previously used for his Digital Freedom Platform currently automatically forwards to the Brian for Mayor donations page. If you go to freedomplatform.tv/donate, it seamlessly redirects you to brianformayor.london/donations form. And I think you'd have to be paying attention to make sure to spot that there was a transition going on there. There was some other interesting stuff in that donations form. It included a terms and conditions page, which explains that this platform is a website operated by Brian for Mayor Limited, trading as the Brian for Mayor campaign. Or at least that's what it said up until about a month ago. Because about a month ago, someone looked up Brian for Mayor Limited on Companies House and found out that no such company existed. There is no Brian for Mayor Limited. Now the terms state the platform is a website operated by Longstem Limited, trading as Brian for Mayor campaign, Longstem Limited being Brian Rose's company. He was attributing the donations to a company that never existed, just wrote it in the terms and conditions as far as we can tell. That same interview with the Evening Standard, in that interview, Rose admits that the campaign, with the bus, the advertising, the campaign staff, all of that, came at significant cost. In fact, the article in the Evening Standard was originally titled, My £1 Million Bid to Become Your Mayor, which makes sense, given that he said in the interview that he'd spent a 7-figure sum on his campaign, although he said that it's self-funded by his former life as a banker in the US and at the company formerly known as ICAP PLC in the UK, as well as through his YouTube channel and his associated Academy London Reel. It seems odd that Rose neglected to mention crowdfunding via his campaign's website as a source of income when asked how he was funding his campaign, when so many of his campaign emails appeal for public donations. I've got more than 70 or 80 emails from his campaign since the start of the year, and literally dozens of them, I'd say the majority of them even, ask for donations. Essentially, the ones that aren't trying to get me to sign up for one of his expensive courses are asking me to donate to his campaign. And bear in mind, the ones that asked me to sign up for his courses were emails he sent me using his mayoral campaign mailing list to market his self-improvement courses, which I'm not convinced that, I don't know, I haven't looked at the law perfectly, but I'm not wholly sure that's GDPR compliant. If someone says, I'd like to volunteer for your mayoral campaign, and you start emailing them marketing material for your product. More significantly, however, is this claim he has that he spent more than £1 million on his campaign. Because UK electoral law stipulates that the London mayoral candidates have a spending cap of £420,000. I mentioned that in the last show when we didn't know how much he'd spent, and once I saw the interview where he said how much he spent, I actually called the Electoral Commission to check and to say, if Brian Rose has spent £1 million on his campaign as he claims, Is that a problem? And they said, yes, it will be. Campaign spending includes all the costs associated with the campaign, which would mean any of that advertising taken out by Rose, which promoted his mayoral campaign, would need to be declared and factored in, as would any time any non-voluntary staff spent working for the Brian for Mayor campaign. Now, given that Rose's admission to the Evening Standard appears to indicate that he spent more than the financing limit, we're only left with a few possibilities that I can see. One is that Rose was mistaken as to how much money he spent when he was talking to the journalist. The second is that he misled the Evening Standard and exaggerated how much he spent, possibly in order to make himself seem even bigger and more serious than he actually, more of a serious contender than he is, in the same way that he's now second in with the bookies and that kind of thing. And the third is that he admitted honestly in the interview to an honest spend and therefore admitted to breaking campaign spending laws. Now, we have to wait until mid-June when campaign spending is declared to find out which of those it is. But if he has broken the spending limit, that is a matter for the police, is what the Electoral Commission told me. Maybe, as I say, he's just mistaken there. But not all of his questions about his finances will be answered in June, however. So while his mayoral campaign and Associated Press coverage continue to boost Rose's profile, we've got absolutely no way of knowing whether this is equated to a greater interest in his self-improvement courses, his various investment advice and schemes, or subscriptions to his YouTube account. And speaking to the Electoral Commission did give me some clarity on another financial question. If a candidate in a local election raises through donation more money than they are able to or allowed to spend given the limit, where does that money go once the campaign ends? And the answer that I was showed by the Electoral Commission is that conventionally, it might be reasonably expected for a candidate to return the money to the individual donors or to donate what's left to charity. But there was no obligation to do so. And that it wasn't the job of the Electoral Commission or indeed anybody to track where the money went after the campaign. But maybe, Rose will do what is conventionally the thing. If he's as wealthy as he claimed, if his campaign has the grassroots groundswell of support that he claimed, maybe he will give that money back if he has an over amount left in his account.
Maybe.
Or maybe he'll give it to a charity. It's very hard to know.
Maybe.
We may never know. The truth is, we may never know any of this, because even people like Dorian Yates, who've appeared in more than 100 of Brian Rose's videos, even people like him are apparently censored from asking this free speech champion what the truth is.
So in the UK, we are slowly on track to lift social distancing restrictions as the vaccine program continues to roll out. And I'm not sure really that any of us expected 13 months ago that we'd still be here now. I think at the time I thought to myself, 3 months, maybe 6 months, 3 to 6 months, something like that. And I thought I was being pessimistic at 6 months. Never mind 13 to 16 months, which is where we're actually going to end up at.
Yeah.
But things are slowly improving, and that's a reason to be happy. And I recognise as well that puts us in a position of immense privilege as a country, that we've got a path out of this, and it looks like it might be a realistic path out of this, when so many other countries have got no access to the vaccine, no roadmap for when things are going. Like the story in India at the moment is particularly bleak at the moment. It's absolutely...
It really is. It's terrible.
Dreadful what's going on in India at the moment. So while I'm very happy that things are starting to open up for us, I also recognise how lucky we are to be in that position. But over the course of the last 13 months, people have found different ways to handle being stuck at home. Lots of people took up cooking as a hobby. For example, I did a little bit of that. It wasn't lockdown related. I just fancied some cooking, but it turns out that, lots of other people have done the same thing. And we might have more on cooking in a future episode. We'll see. And the streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, all that sort of stuff, that I imagine they've probably done very well out of it as well, with, an awful lot of people sitting at home watching TV. Tiger King was obviously a massive deal at the start of the pandemic.
Never watched it. Didn't bother.
The whole world seemed to love that show. It's strange, crooked, true crime world that this show was lived in, with all these larger than life people who you kind of don't believe exist. And I don't think we ever talked about Tiger King on air.
Well, we didn't watch it. I think only you watched it. So
yeah, I watched a few episodes, but literally only a few, and I really didn't enjoy it. It was awful people being awful, saying awful things, and the poor cats and the conditions that they were living in was I had to turn it off. I couldn't deal with it. It was just no. I
love that. It's like, I don't think we talked about Tiger King. I mean, admittedly, that's because you guys didn't watch it, and I stopped watching it very quickly.
It.
Yeah. That's probably why then.
But there was some really good stuff that's been there too. I loved WandaVision at the start of this year. I really enjoyed watching WandaVision. I watched Marvel's Agent Carter last year. I watched that's been out for a while, but I only got around to watching it last year.
Yeah, I watched it at the time. It was good fun.
Really enjoyed Agent Carter. I've watched more RuPaul's Drag Race than I can accurately describe. It's ridiculous amount of that. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon Prime. I don't know if either of you watched that, but I really, really enjoyed that.
Nicola watched all of it.
About a 50s Jewish housewife who becomes a stand-up comedian. And it was a really fun show. I really enjoyed that show. I've rewatched all of Breaking Bad, which didn't change my opinion of it. Every single character in that is still awful.
Shite.
Better Call Saul, I'm having more fun with watching that at the moment. I rewatched a lot of House with Hugh Laurie.
I rewatched House recently.
Really enjoyed House. Well, I enjoyed House first time I watched it. I'm not enjoying it so much this time round. I really enjoy Hugh Laurie, and I enjoy Hugh Laurie's performance is brilliant, but the whole series seems to be predicated on the trope that it doesn't matter how much of an obnoxious shit you are, if you're really, really good at your job, you're forgiven for it. And that's remarkably prevalent trope in fiction.
And it's that other trope of character coded as autistic is awful.
Yes.
Can't get along with anybody and is disliked by all of his peers.
But what I wanted to talk about this week was a show that I found when I was poring over the TV services looking for something to watch. And I spotted a show called Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, presented by Jonathan Frakes.
Hello.
Jonathan Frakes being Commander Riker from Star Trek The Next Generation.
Oh, right, blimey.
Who still pops up in bits of Star Trek today every so often. The format of the show has got Frakes giving clumsily scripted introductions to short dramatizations of some creepy, spooky or otherworldly event. And then afterwards challenges the viewer to guess if the story was fact or fiction. Basically, it's our giant book of fantastic facts segment, but on the telly with Commander Riker.
Okay.
And because it was made in the 90s, it's Commander Riker looking like he does in Star Trek.
Full beard?
With the full beard on and everything. So he looks identical to the way he does in Star Trek movies because he was shooting this at the same time as the Star Trek movies. Except in the first series of Beyond Belief, where he looks just like Thanos' dad. Which is because it wasn't Jonathan Frakes in the first series, it was James Brolin.
Oh, okay. It was James Brolin.
So, literally Thanos' dad.
Gotcha.
So, I thought this had the potential to be entertaining. I thought, why not? And so I sat down to watch an episode of it. It was the first episode of season 3, which happens to be the first one that's available on Amazon Prime. They don't have season 1 and 2 for whatever reason. And the episode opens with "Tonight," says Frakes, "you will see stories that may be inspired by actual events or they may be clever lies. But in judging them, be careful of what they may seem to be. There may be hidden truths contained within."
Okay.
So there were 5 segments to the episode that I watched.
Listeners cannot see how pleased you look with yourself here. I think that would really enhance their experience. They can see just how pleased you look with yourself.
The first story starts with Frakes talking about pregnancy tests. "Today's modern versions are said to be 99% accurate," he says, "though 1 percentage point does leave room for doubt." I mean, there's a bit more to it than that, Jonathan. For more information, listen to episode 285. We went into it in some detail. Anyway, the show then presents a dramatization in which an 18-year-old woman is struggling with what seems to be the early indications of pregnancy, including morning sickness, cravings, abdominal swelling, and so on. But the woman, who is named Marissa in the story, is repeatedly and loudly insisting that she is not pregnant and she has never had sex, a fact which is attested to by the pregnancy test that her parents make her take, which is negative, though that 1 percentage point does leave room for doubt. The style of this is abominable, incidentally. It's very, very melodramatic. It's like an American soap opera in tone. It's all directed by some bloke called Skip Skulnick, who apparently went on to direct episodes of Angel.
Oh, really?
And it ended up as a producer on Torchwood. But yeah, it's appalling. It's absolutely dreadful. So the doctors x-ray Marissa's abdomen. Not an ideal thing to do in a suspected pregnancy, but
ultrasound it, come on. Good Lord.
They x-ray Marissa's abdomen and identify what seems to be a large cyst. In a scene where the doctor delights in patronizing a young woman and telling her that she doesn't understand her own body or how she feels. But when the doctors operate to remove the cyst, do the emergency operation to remove the cyst, what they discover inside her is, shock, an octopus. because she has swallowed octopus eggs that summer while on holiday and they had gestated inside her. Now, I'm not going to insult either of you by asking if you think this story was fact or fiction.
No, this is bollocks.
And to be fair to the show, despite lots of build-up and implication that this might be true, they also say, yeah, this isn't true.
So did they make that up?
Well, this is a proper old-school Snopes job.
Okay.
This is an urban legend dating back to at least the 1930s, if not before that. And I strongly suspect that the writers at Beyond Belief used Snopes as the source for this story, because their telling is almost identical to the version that appears on Snopes, with the X-ray, with the girl insisting she's not pregnant, the pregnancy test being negative. Beat for beat, it is absolutely the same story that is on Snopes. Although, in fairness, Beyond Belief was 1999 that this episode airs. The Snopes story is dated 2000, but they may just, they've got it from the same internet viral email or whatever.
Yeah.
Frankly, I would be surprised if even a fertilized octopus egg, once ingested, would be able to, would find a welcoming environment within the human gastrointestinal tract. Yes, there's organisms whose life cycle depends on passing through the digestive system of another organism. I just don't think octopuses are one of them. I think if you swallowed an octopus egg, you would digest an octopus egg.
Yeah, definitely.
Is what would happen.
Yes, but hasn't there been a weird thing of if you don't swallow the egg, but there was definitely something where it got stuck somewhere in someone's throat? Or was that like a sperm or something like that? There was definitely something that was fishy, squiddy, spermy, eggy.
You can get situations where if you swallow a live octopus, which some cultures will eat live octopuses, the octopus can cling on in your throat and can cause you to choke to death.
Yeah.
And the kind of serpent bursting forth from the human body is a story going way back into history, medieval times, of people vomiting frogs and things like that. And very obviously played out in Alien, of course.
Yes, yeah.
You know, which is just the modern version of a very, very ancient story of human beings vomiting up reptiles, or octopuses in this case. But yeah, that didn't fucking happen. The second segment tells the story of a ruthless estate agent who sells a cursed mansion called Hampton Manor to a wealthy stockbroker and his wife. Annoyingly, the estate agent here is portrayed as being greedy and deceitful. The license plate on her car, for example, is just a string of dollar signs.
I don't think that would be legal, would it?
Probably not.
I think you struggle to get that past the DVLA.
And she knows that Hampton Manor is meant to be cursed, but doesn't tell the buyer about it.
I mean, to be fair, if I was an estate agent and I was told that the house was cursed, I wouldn't tell the buyer either, because curses aren't real.
Yes, yeah.
And that's the justification she gives to her assistant. She's like, oh, you should have told him. And she's like, there's no such thing as a cursed house. Don't be ridiculous. There's nothing in the real estate code of ethics that says I have to tell potential buyers about silly superstitions. That's the justification she gives in the show. And I think that's a legitimate point of view, frankly, but she's very much portrayed as the villain.
Why put somebody off buying a property if they do believe in curses by telling them that some people believe there's a curse on a property when curses don't exist?
I've got a funny feeling, and this might be complete bollocks, that there was a case once of someone failing to declare that their house was thought to be haunted, and they sided against the seller in favour of the buyer. Is this where you're going, Mike? Or
it's not where I'm going, but I've also heard that same thing, that the court was like, yeah, no, you should have said. And like skeptics around the world are going, what are you talking about?
Yeah, not because haunting's real, but because some people will think haunting's real, which might limit your ability to sell your house to idiots in the future, for example.
Affect the resale value. Yeah. But yeah, so she doesn't tell the potential buyer, the stockbroker, the rich stockbroker, that it's a cursed house because curses don't exist. Perfectly reasonable thing to do. 6 months later, the stockbroker returns. His hair is now grey, and his wife has left him. His stocks have crashed, and he's developed a bleeding ulcer that causes him constant pain, is the way he acts that in the very melodramatic way. Oh, it's constant pain.
Gotcha.
He demands to know why he wasn't told about the curse, and wants the house to be sold immediately, because if it remains in his possession for a second longer, he just knows he's going to die.
Wait, so he genuinely does believe there's a curse?
Yes.
And he wants to sell the property.
Wants to sell a property
Wants to pass the curse on to somebody else.
And of course, the estate agent, sensing his desperation, offers to buy the place from him personally, because she doesn't think curses are real, at less than half of its valuation.
Smart.
So she does.
She's in the right.
So she buys it off him right there and then. She gets the deeds out of her drawer, because she's also the mortgage broker apparently, and signs it immediately over to him.
And then she immediately the next day puts it on the market for 3/4 of its valuation and sells it on very quickly. Done.
That night, lightning strikes while the estate agent is sitting in the bath on the phone in the mansion, and she is electrocuted and dies immediately.
That night?
That night.
She's gone to the mansion that night. The guy's only just sold it. He's not even had time to get all his stuff out.
She's in the bath on the phone.
And she's in the bath on the phone.
Connected.
She said the phone connected. But like, even if he's had a chance to get all of his stuff out, she's not had a chance to get all of her stuff in. So she's gone, right, I've just bought this literally that night. So I bought this literally 4 or 5 hours ago. First thing I'm going to do is get naked in some water in this empty, cavernous, cursed house. Ludicrous.
And so ends the story of the Curse of Hampton Manor. So what do you both think? Do you think there's a Curse of Hampton Manor? Was there a real Hampton Manor?
There may have been a real Hampton Manor. People may have thought it was cursed. I don't believe it turned a stockbroker's hair white or gave him an ulcer or electrocuted naked phone lady 4 hours after she bought it. What do you reckon, Alice?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Well, Jonathan Frakes claims that this is based on a true story. And thanks to the details he gives on air, it wasn't actually too tricky to find out what he was talking about. The real cursed mansion is Dunellen Hall in Greenwich, Connecticut. And according to a 1988 article from the Associated Press, Dunellen Hall was built in 1918 for Daniel Reed, who was president of the American Tin Plate Company, and he had it built as a wedding present for his daughter. But since then, it's been owned by a succession of people who have invariably encountered bad luck.
Sorry, you stressed people in a very weird way. Since then, it's been owned by a succession of people. As if, like, we would have expected 1 or 2 people, but other than that, it would have mostly been dogs and ducks. But people, unbelievable.
It was owned by someone called Loring Washburn, who lost the house after financial trouble. It was owned by Daniel Moran, who shot and killed himself. It was owned by Jack Dick, who was indicted for fraud before suddenly dying at the age of 46. It was owned by Ravi Tikku, who lost his fortune during the petrol crisis of the mid-70s. And ultimately, it was owned by Harry and Leona Helmsley, who were indicted for 188 counts of tax evasion.
See, all of those sound like just a collection of either bad luck or bad choices.
Yeah, loads of bad choices in there.
I mean, the cursed house does not make you commit 188 counts of tax fraud. That's not what the cursed house does. It might make you get caught for having committed the 188 counts of tax fraud, but it certainly doesn't cause it. So that is a catalogue of misfortune, but it certainly does not include a ruthless real estate agent dying in the bath. And of course, all of that's got fuck all to do with the house, or indeed any alleged curse, except perhaps to the extent that the sort of people who are going to purchase a 28-bedroom mansion are probably going to be company presidents and city investors who are more likely than single parents from Bexhill-on-Sea to lose all of their money in a stock market crash.
That's fair.
Sort of like how it isn't BMWs that make you drive a dickhead, it's being an arrogant, arsehole, aggressive apprentice contestant that makes you want to buy a Beamer.
That might be the most controversial and audience-splitting thing we've ever said on this show. Good Lord.
Incidentally, although Leona Helmsley was convicted of tax evasion and given a 16-year sentence, and this was reduced on appeal, according to Wikipedia, and she only served 19 months of that sentence, followed by 2 months under house arrest.
Well, that's good luck.
In the cursed house?
She was house arrested in a cursed house.
In the cursed house. She then lived to the age of 87 in various properties, including using Dunellen Hall as her summer home, where she lived until 2007. So she lived there for a long time, quite happily.
If you've got a 28-bedroom property as your summer home, I think you deserve a bit of cursing, to be honest. I think there's some you've had the opposite of a curse for too long in your life. This is just regression to the mean.
Well, also, bonus fact, the lawyer who represented her at the appeal in the 80s was Alan Dershowitz, who represented Donald Trump during his impeachment trial.
Yes, and Epstein.
Also, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, O.J. Simpson. He's got a laundry list of these folks. So sure, I'll give them based on a true story for that, but that's,
very loosely.
It's, yeah.
There was a house.
There was a cursed house. Like,
there was a house and bad luck happened. You know what? It would be weird if nobody who lived in a house had bad luck.
Yeah.
Anywhere in the world in all of history. It just didn't happen.
It would be weirder if it wasn't based on a true story.
The next segment tells the story of two brothers who work at a wax museum, Pierre and André Saint-Jean. Pierre is a temperamental perfectionist who snaps at his brother, but his brother tolerates that behavior because it turns out it doesn't matter how much of an obnoxious shit you are. If you're really, really good at your job, you're forgiven for it.
Oh, I know the answer to this. Pierre was a figment of his brother's imagination. They were both the same person, and it was like a Fight Club situation.
You spoiled Fight Club there.
Spoilers for Fight Club.
I think we're past spoilers for Fight Club now. I think the incel generation itself has been what spoiled Fight Club.
I'm inclined to agree. When building a new wax exhibit representing the execution of Marie Antoinette, Pierre insists on having an exact replica of the blade used to behead Antoinette fitted to the guillotine that's on display. It's got to be as sharp as the real thing, an absolute replica. There then proceeds to be a series of set pieces, like the start of an episode of Casualty, where characters variously narrowly avoid getting beheaded while inspecting the guillotine. And you see the pin holding the blade up is shown to be supernaturally moving out of position, and the wax figure of the executioner seems to be supernaturally operating the device. It's like, why did you put the executioner next to the guillotine? I didn't. Oh, what happened?
Oh, God.
The wax figure's holding the rope. You never see anything move, but suddenly it's holding the rope and things like that. So what do you think to this one? Pierre and Andre, the Wax Museum brothers.
Go on, Alice, you go first this time.
It just sounds like bollocks to me.
I mean, in fairness, I watched this show, and at the end of every one, I went, well, no, obviously that didn't happen. Obviously that's bollocks.
I don't even necessarily believe that anybody believed it at the time. Like, I get maybe people having eerie, spooky stories about being in a wax museum because they are going to be freaky, especially like if you're wandering around on your own. But yeah, I can't believe for a minute that anybody actually believed that.
I did mention on the show back in the day that I was mistaken for a waxwork once.
Yes, I remember that.
I don't know if you were on the show at that point, Alice.
Don't remember.
I was at a wax museum in New York, and I was standing there waiting for my friends who were buying stuff at the at the gift shop, and someone stand beside me and posed for a photograph, and I looked round at them, and they went, "Oh my God, you're a real person!" And I was like, "Yeah, who the fuck do you think I was?"
What were you doing while you were waiting?
I was just standing still. Very still, apparently.
That's what would have done it, yeah.
I mean, to be fair, still. Occasionally on Zoom, when you're looking at your phone, you look like you're frozen because... But it's very different to in real life, and if you're not eyes fixed on something because your eyes are naturally moving.
Where I get off on this story, where I'm not on board with this story, where I don't think it's real, is I don't think even a perfectionist would have needed to set up as a working guillotine. Because you can have something that looks exactly like a guillotine that doesn't actually work as a guillotine. Creating a working guillotine with the actual mechanics of a guillotine is an unnecessary level of detail that I just don't know why you'd go to that, even as a perfectionist.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like having a Civil War exhibit, and I'm such a perfectionist, I even loaded the muskets with actual gunpowder. Why would you do that? You don't need to do that. It doesn't add anything to anything.
Well, this is the first one that's actually a little bit complicated and tricky as a story, because on the show, Frakes says, this really happened. It happened at a wax museum in Canada 3 decades ago, but I've not been able to find anything which corroborates that at all. What I did find, however, was another podcast, a podcast called Believe It or Don't with Kristen and Caleb, which started out as a podcast which was looking at individual episodes of Beyond Belief with Jonathan Frakes and talking about whether or not they're true, which was really annoying because I was most of the way through researching this episode when I found out that someone else was doing exactly the same fucking format, better than us and before us, which was really annoying. But in the extra episode that they did, because they do their main show and they do one called Extra, they speculate that the story of the temperamental brothers setting up the execution of Marie Antoinette is actually derived from the real execution of Marie Antoinette. So after she was executed in 1793, an artist was employed to make a death mask, that is, a wax effigy of Marie Antoinette's face. The artist that was employed was a woman named Marie Grossholtz, who was employed to make death masks of several other prominent figures in the French Revolution, including Robespierre and Louis XVI. A few years later, in 1795, Marie Grossholtz then married a man called Francois Tussaud and changed her name to Madame Tussaud, and took her collection of wax sculptures and death masks with her on a tour of Europe, including Great Britain, for the next 33 years under the name of Madame Tussaud. By 1835, this had become a permanent museum in Baker Street in London, and after her death, it was taken over by her two sons, Francois and Joseph. In 1854, a few years after Tussaud died, her son Joseph travelled to Paris and purchased the original guillotine blade, which was used in Marie Antoinette's execution, from the estate of the executioner, a man named Henri Sanson. And that original blade is still on display at Tussauds in London now.
Yes, but not part of a working guillotine that anybody could wander along and get beheaded by.
No, it's hung on the wall.
Yeah.
Safely and securely.
But you can see that all the pieces are there for this story. You've got the two French brothers, Francois and Joseph, running a wax museum. That desire for authenticity, which in real life was Joseph going and buying the original blade from the estate of the executioner, but in the story is Pierre buying an exact replica of it. But all the spooky shit about people being almost killed, like the start of an episode of Casualty, that's an invention. That didn't fucking happen.
Yeah.
As to why Jonathan Frakes claims this happened in Canada in the 60s, I haven't a fucking clue. Right, so story number 4. This was a story all about how my life got turned up. No, hang on. Sorry, wrong bit. This is a story all about a nurse who's working late at a hospital caring for a severely anemic patient who is refusing solid food and looking creepily at her. The patient is then visited by two people dressed in black with East European accents who arrive at 2 a.m.
Okay. Were they going to Salisbury Cathedral? I've seen this before somewhere.
The nurse agrees to allow the visitors to stay, even though it is past visiting hours, at the insistence of a patient who demands to spend time with his friends, although she later catches the mysterious couple with East European accents leaving in the elevator, dragging behind 2 heavy bags of something. Checking on her patient, the nurse discovers dozens of empty bags of blood stashed in his room. She's then attacked by the patient, who kills a hospital orderly and assaults a guard with seemingly preternatural strength, leaving the orderly with 2 puncture marks on his neck.
Fuck off.
The same orderly had earlier mentioned that 200 bags of plasma had been stolen from the blood bank at the hospital that day.
Yeah, there'd just been a break-in at the blood bank.
The patient then leaps from the 6th-story window and disappears into the night. And the hospital arranged to cover up because it doesn't want to be associated with vampires. The nurse then speculates to herself, was the patient really a vampire, or is he pretending to be a vampire to dissuade the hospital from reporting the theft because everyone would think they're weird? So do you think that story is true or false?
Well, most of that story is obviously bollocks. There's not a chance in hell he jumped from a 6th-story window, or that he killed an orderly by leaving puncture marks. I mean, come on, surely not.
I reckon there will be elements of the story that are based on truth.
Which elements? That's the important bit, though, isn't it? Like, hospitals exist, yes.
Well, yes, hospitals exist. It'll be something like, yes, there was a very pale guy and he was suspected of being a vampire and there were, like, rumours about stuff. And maybe something weird happened. Maybe he did fall out of a window and survived okay. But it was actually something innocuous that caused that. Like, there'll be elements of it that are based in truth.
your elements that are based in truth is, yeah, maybe there was a pale guy and maybe it was a bit weird and some people accused him of stuff.
I mean, to be fair, before we had based on a true story for a haunted house that bore none of the resemblance to the actual story.
No, I agree. But when you say some of the details are real, it's got to be the nouns and the verbs in the sentence and not just the ofs and ands.
So on the face of it, of course, this is complete fucking horseshit. Vampires aren't real. They aren't leaping out of 6-story windows or attacking security guards twice their size. And, of course, if the hospital covered it up, how the fuck does Jonathan Frakes know about it?
Unless he's a vampire.
He was that vampire. He was that pale man. But annoyingly, the show claims that this is a true story and says that it happened to a nurse on the East Coast 20 years ago, which would have been around 1979. I can't find anything to corroborate this at all.
No, of course you can't, because vampires aren't real.
But not even someone posing as a vampire to try and steal blood in some sort of, misdirection heist thing. And the podcast I mentioned before, Believe It or Don't podcast, Kristen from that show, she wasn't able to find anything that corroborated this either. And of course, as Kristen points out in her research, blood theft does happen, but there's no reason to think that, this particular thing happened. One of the things Kristen talks about in her episode on this is she talked about Al-Qaeda is known to steal blood from hospitals to treat their wounded because they don't want to risk taking them to a medical facility and getting arrested. So they will go in and they'll steal blood from hospitals. And often the hospitals don't stop them doing it. Security forces don't stop them doing it. Possibly because it's fucking Al-Qaeda, you don't want to piss them off, but also because when someone in a hospital, Al-Qaeda is stealing it to treat wounded, it's like, well, if I stop them, someone might die.
Keep them alive, yeah.
And when you're a doctor, that sort of shit's important here. The illegal organ trade, the so-called red market, does exist. And alongside your trade in livers, kidneys and hearts, you're going to need blood to do the illegal surgery you're doing with your illegal organs that you've stolen. And that blood can come from donors, willing or unwilling. It can come from dodgy hospital administrators selling blood on the side, and it can come from blood bank thefts. So I don't think that we can rule out that maybe somebody stole blood from a US hospital in the 70s, but I'm fairly confident they weren't vampires or posing as vampires or visited by mysterious East European strangers.
I can't even imagine that anybody would think, do you know what the best cover for our crime will be? If we just pretend to be vampires, then people are going to not report it because they might think they're weird. You just report, oh yeah, no, there was a couple of people who were pretending to be vampires.
Because of course you would,
Yeah.
The final story in this episode of Beyond Belief with Jonathan Frakes is about a corrupt carnival owner called Big Ralph.
Okay.
Big Ralph is a murderer and a con man who is hiding out from the law by running a massive carnival. Because, of course, a carnival...
Great way to hide.
It doesn't draw any attention to itself at all. While running the carnival, the murdering con man Ralph can't help himself and starts swindling children out of money with rigged carnival games. Because, when you're a con man, it's in your blood. It's a vocation.
Just to be clear, rigged carnival games, by which you mean carnival games. They're all rigged.
They're all rigged.
The thing.
Indeed, yeah. Until one day, a strangely familiar-looking old man comes along and helps the children play. And he just keeps winning and winning and winning and hands all the prizes he wins over to the children that Big Ralph has been scamming. Eventually, Big Ralph closes down the stall and says the stall is down for repairs now and just, slams the shutter closed. And after an altercation with the old man, Ralph demands that the old man pay for all the toys that he's won. The old man refuses, says he's won those toys fair and square, and Big Ralph knocks him to the ground and steps on his glasses and breaks them.
It's Santa, isn't it? That's who the old man is. That's where he gets the toys.
The old man then laughs and says, Ralph, you're going to get what's coming to you.
There you go, like, ho, 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 and get what's coming to you. He means coal because it's the naughty or nice thing. It's Santa. It's definitely Santa.
Definitely Santa. A few minutes later...
a lot of reindeer appear.
Ralph is sent to investigate a fault on the ghost train. There's a train gone off the rails. Ralph, you need to get back there and fix it. All right. So he goes backstage on the ghost train. And after his torch fails, Ralph hears the old man laughing in the darkness and he cries out, ho, ho, ho. When his staff come to investigate, they find Ralph dead. And he's hanged by a hoop from the ring toss game he was using to swindle the children. And beside him is a giggling mannequin which looks just like the old man, and his glasses are still broken from where Ralph had stepped on them. Thankfully, the show doesn't even attempt to claim this one is true.
Well, I'm glad for that, yeah. God.
I don't get that, though. This is just basically a ghost story.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, imagine how, if this story was ever meant to be true, and the only thing that happened in this story was Mad Franco, it was called, saw an old man, pissed off an old man, and then was killed by an old man. Who did he tell? Oh, by the way, I've just pissed off an old man and stood on his glasses. So nobody would in any way say
there's no one
this
to
remarkable.
report the story. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was something that was pointed out on the other podcast, is who told this story?
Yeah.
The only man who knows about the old man is dead. The only man who knows that he met a mannequin that looks just like the old man is dead. You know, it didn't fucking happen. But it is a pretty beat perfect, ironic death piece of folklore. That kind of, death by irony trope. Ralph is a con man and a murderer on the run, which gives us permission not to feel bad about him dying. He's met with his comeuppance in a nice, ironic way, using the very hoops that he was using to steal money from children. And the carnival itself is a version of that circus of fear trope. Fiction is littered with stories of sinister carnivals and sideshows.
Yeah, yeah.
Appearing in everything from the 80s Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, where the carnival transports the children off into an alternate universe, to Torchwood. There was a episode of Torchwood with a evil carnival in it, and the 1967 horror movie Torture Garden, which stars Burgess Meredith, who was the Penguin in the Adam West Batman, and Rocky's trainer.
Oh yeah,
he plays Dr. Diablo, who's running a carnival, and I think he turns out it's not really a carnival, it's purgatory, and he's the devil.
Gotcha. Get up, you son of a bitch, because Dr. Diablo loves you.
Which they subtly disguise by calling him Dr. Diablo instead of the devil. But Torture Garden, incidentally, was one of a series of films made by Amicus Productions using their portmanteau format, which was a series of 5 or 6 short, ironic tales presented with an overarching linking narrative, not unlike Beyond Belief itself. Except in Torture Garden, you didn't get Commander Riker turning up every 10 minutes with a dodgy pun to tell you that he'd made it all up. So, Skeptics in the Pub online, we've got an event going on tonight. Marsh, you want to give us an update on that?
Yeah, this should be a really, really interesting one. It's with Mariana Spring, who's the BBC's official disinformation researcher. She spent, I think, the last year and a bit being the BBC's kind of lead researcher on online conspiracy theories and online misinformation, disinformation, and squarely in the kind of conspiracy theory territory that we as skeptics tend to look at. And she's going to be talking about her first year becoming essentially an online agony aunt for conspiracy theory believers and people who've left those kind of movements. So that should be really, really interesting and well worth checking out.
And I gather that there's a new episode of Be Reasonable as well.
There is. Speaking of conspiracy theories, I interviewed a vet by the name of Paul Boland, who I was very much intending to talk to about his use of alternative medicine for animals and how he's expanded into doing practices with humans and how he'll now treat humans with all sorts of diseases. And that was very much my intent. And at one point, very early in the interview, I asked him, so how do you get into alternative treatments? And he said, well, I'm a conspiracy theorist, you see. And at that point, I basically ripped up all the rest of my questions and winged the rest of the interview. But I think it's worth listening to all the same. I think it's an interesting one.
And you'll find that up on our website, which is merseysideskeptics.org.uk, and you will be able to watch Mariana Spring at twitch.tv/SITP. One other thing is Patreon. We have a Patreon. If you can afford it, if you would like to afford it, if you'd like to support the show, we would encourage you to go to patreon.com/MercySkeptics and donate what you can, as little or as much as you like. You don't get anything extra except our eternal gratitude. But it really helps the show out, and it helps Merseyside Skeptics out, and it's basically what funds everything we do. If you can't afford that, or you're just not willing, or you're just not able to, one thing that we would appreciate instead is a review. If you want to go to the podcasting software of your choice and leave a review for the show, preferably a good review, but I can't really force you to do that either. But if you would like to help the show out, those are the two ways that you can do that. Aside from that, then, that's all we have time for.
I think so.
All that remains then is for me to thank Marsh for coming on today.
Cheers.
And thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
We've been Skeptics with a K, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.
Okay. Hello, Morgan.
Hey, Morgan.
Hope there may well be a very low fan hiss in the background of my recording. It's off my laptop that is currently trying to fix itself. Not the one I'm working on, a different one. But it's mid-vital fix and I can't really do anything about it. So hopefully it's not coming through.
Wait, if it's not the one you're using, why don't you just put it in your bedroom while it's scanning?
Too late now, isn't it?
You had all this time.
It's because it's plugged into everything.
A little bit of light noise reduction, it'll be fine.
It's a very light hiss. I can barely hear it, so hopefully it won't be very, very pleasant there. Anyway.
I've just put a hole in my hand. I scratch my rash.
You and Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mike, you're doing a lot of leaning there.
So I've just picked the stitching open on this pocket.
What? Oh, okay, right.
Is it a new pocket, or is it like the stitching on the opening of the pocket because it's a new jacket, or is it the stitching in the bottom of the pocket?
I'm guessing it's neither of those. I'm guessing it's the stitching to open the pocket because it's a really old jacket, but he just never got around to it.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Because nobody opens the stitching on their pockets and they're like, oh, God, I wish I had a pocket. And then you never get around to opening the stitching.
Yeah.
I would always open the stitching on pockets because so few of my things have pockets. You're just like, oh, well, I don't need to undo the stitching on my jacket pocket because I've got my trouser pockets.
Yeah. Got pockets coming out my ears.
Right. Let's do it. Let's do an intro to the show. Right. It is Thursday, what's the fucking date?
29th.
29th, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should know that. I think it's my dad's birthday, isn't it?
It's 3 days from today, and today's the 26th.
It is the 29th.
Yeah. On it. All about it, mate.
I'll pop her out for a wee one sec. Come on.
Also turns out that the guy who invented the guillotine, it was his son who executed Marie Antoinette with his dad's invention.
Ah, nice.
While his dad was in the audience going, "Go on, son."
That's mine, that is.
But in French, obviously.
Yeah. Canon. I don't know what that'd be in French.
Le son.
Just va, probably. Va, garçon, va, fil.